Today we're going to talk about two cases about the quantum computing industry. And this will be the first time we're using the same case worksheet to consolidate and analyze evidence from two different sources. And also the first time we'll be thinking about an organization that is not just one business, but in this case is a constellation of businesses, a little emerging industry around quantum computing. We're going to try very hard to do this whole thing in just over an hour. And I'm going to be keeping rigorous time on my cell phone. But without further ado, I think we should begin. How do we want to begin with the goals? Like Belinda or Heng Long, feel free to leap in while I start my timer.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it's appropriate to to look at this from the perspective from one company at first, and then we can interpret it as an industrial one.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Go for it.
Do you think it makes sense with D-Wave?
Sorry?
Do you think it makes sense to start with D-Wave then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So.
Do you want to kick off or?
Probably I will go for the Microsoft.
Yeah. So, I mean, these two papers to me, this is I'm not narrowing in on the goals as yet, but to me, they're a very interesting representation of speculation and industry response to that. So what's interesting throughout the papers, I think, is the kind of industries in turn that are responding to the speculative, sexy, exciting, but also hidden research of an organization like D-Wave, which is responding to a perceived need. And the response comes from logistics, big build, kit, things like Lockheed. So in terms of goals, I found it quite difficult to approach it from one direction, much like the other paper, because you have the goals of one organization to make a name for themselves, to potentially genuinely forge forward in terms of research, to answer industrial need. But I wonder what you think, Henlong.
From my own perspective, if we do it as a normal way, like identify the goal of D-Wave or Microsoft, is it's much easier.
Yes.
But from the perspective of the Microsoft, I can see one goal of that company can be generalized as the industrial goal, which is they try to develop themselves in a direction of a new economy based on the computers, which I think is the foundation of the quantum computers industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I agree. I think it's, on the one hand, I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of do two sources together with each other and to think about it at the level of an industry, because it obviously is harder and it requires you to think in slightly different ways from if you're thinking about just one company and what its goals are. Like if we think about, D-Wave, Microsoft, and Bell Labs, Lucent as a constellation of companies, on the one hand, I think exactly like Belinda is saying, each one of these companies is trying to kind of show itself to be the leader in the field. But if you look at both sources, it actually is also true that they're doing things together because they realize that the industry as a whole needs to do something in order for everyone in the industry to succeed, right? So how do we think about what the, in a sense, superordinate goals are, the overriding goals for the entire industry and everyone inside it? What are those superordinate goals? Or the superordinate goal, I guess.
The overarching goal is proof of concept.
Yeah, cool.
And that it splits into two. One, the scientific proof of concept. Second, the proof of response to industrial need, moving beyond genuinely and generally intractable goals at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I hear you saying is there is a proof of concept need. They need to somehow show that from a technical perspective, this technology works. And then they also need to prove the concept in the sense that even if the technology works, they need to show that there is some kind of market need that people don't really even understand yet, but they have to demonstrate to people.
Right.
So let's see. Where do we find?
Know they've reached the limit.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah.
So where do we find evidence for these in these documents? I'm just going to change the text side.
So let's go to the first one.
Yeah.
I'm calling the 2012 one the first one in my mind.
Yeah. And
or it came first.
Perfect. So one thing I will say just for all the students' benefit is as you're trying to extract evidence for your argument from multiple sources, when you locate something in one of the sources, you should also be really clear about how you mark it separately from all the other sources you could be marking, right? So how do we, Belinda, how do we refer to the first article, the CIA and Jeff Bezos, I guess, bet on quantum computing?
Yes.
That's the one you're talking about? Okay, so let's just call that the first article, Article 1. I'll mark that in this case worksheet as A1. So what do we find in A1?
Okay, so on page 5, the first full paragraph there, they're talking about computing power being so crucial to maintaining competitive advantage. And that's reiterated throughout that article and the other one.
Yeah.
Moving beyond intractable.
Yes. We're talking about the 2012 article, the CIA and Jeff Bezos bet on quantum computing?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Page 5, the first full paragraph.
So whether or not D-Wave can satisfy skeptics doesn't
Cool.
matter.
Yes. Okay. So that's evidence for the second proof of concept issue. Where do we find?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Cool.
I also want to add another piece of evidence for this use case, which is the last page of the second article, the Microsoft one.
Okay.
They have built a team particularly for like thinking of how to apply the concept into actual economic activities, which is, I think, also another illustration of the use case.
Okay. What page are we on again? Sorry?
Page 9.
Page 9. Okay, great. Feel free, by the way, to also type these things in. I mean, I don't mind doing it as long as you all are talking, because I want to make sure that there is always something going on. So I will add this stuff in, but meanwhile, talk about the sort of the scientific or technical proof of concept. I think in the first article about D-Wave primarily, there's quite a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely, and the lack thereof. So if we look at page 3, paragraph 2, you have evidence of the engineering success and the way in which individual elements of the process are being developed, but not actual results in terms of their overall strategy. That speaks as well, which we'll talk about later, but to the internal process. Constraint and development with D-Wave specifically.
Cool. And sorry, what page are we on again?
That was page 3, paragraph 2.
Page 3, paragraph 2. Cool.
First full paragraph.
Yes, great. Yes. Are we possibly looking at different, this is A1. The first full paragraph the first full paragraph on page 3 is the processor in every computer you've used is made from silicon.
Yeah, no, you're right. I've written this down incorrectly. Let me go and find it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, while Belinda's looking for that, let's look in the subordinate goals. So what are they also trying to do? I think one of the things that certainly seems to me anyway, that everyone in the industry is trying to do is they're trying to they're trying to make a proof of concept about not just the fact that their machine works, but that there is a particular approach to building a machine that is the correct approach, right? So each one of these companies is taking a different technical angle, and they're all trying to convince the mass of people doing the basic research in quantum computing that their particular angle makes the most sense. So I don't know how to phrase that yet, but what do you all think of that idea of that as a subordinate goal that they're trying to all achieve and trying to achieve as the industry?
Yes, I think that's correct. And I think these articles, both 1 and 2, talk about the iterative approach to that. D-Wave in many ways leading the way, then others like Google, Microsoft, IBM picking up and adapting as they realize elements don't suit the wider market need.
Yeah. So where do we find
developing the...
Sorry, go ahead.
Where do we find? I'll come back and give you the specifics. The previous one I was talking about, by the way, was page 4, paragraph 2.
Right. Cool.
I wrote 3 naively.
Ah, yes. Yep. Cool. For sure. Okay. And then let's try and find evidence for this, like, this goal of each one of these companies, but the industry as a whole as well, is trying to figure out the right way to do this stuff, right? So it's slightly different from a proof of concept, producing a thing that works. There is also now the challenge, the goal of convincing everyone in the industry to converge behind the way of doing things. So where do we find evidence of that?
Evidence of the need to convince is throughout.
Yes.
Repeated time and time again.
Yeah.
Let me find.
Let's pull out a couple of examples.
Yeah. So in A2, apologies, page 1, paragraph 3, no one can control the physics enough.
Okay, I'm just going to make a... And what page is that again?
It's A2, page 1, should be paragraph 3.
Cool, perfect. And I'm just going to fill out this last thing. Are there other subordinate goals? Feel free to discuss them while I'm typing this out.
In A1, at least it's quite obvious they try to like attract more real customers rather than just investors. They try to produce a real product instead of the research equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that applies to Microsoft as well, but it's quite always in the D-Way.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, can you put that down in text so that we can bat that idea about a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess just going back to this first subordinate goal, I guess the right way to present this piece of evidence actually is that no one's implementation approach has so far been adequate at controlling these quantum state physics well enough.
No physics, so annoying.
Yeah.
Superior to us all. And very specific language, like in A2.
Yeah.
Page 6, paragraph 3, talking about no one having credible evidence.
Yeah. I think that also applies to the superordinate goal, right?
Yes.
What page is that on, Belinda?
So A2, page 6, paragraph 3, hopefully, assuming I've written some of them down correctly.
Cool. Great.
So that's talking specifically about the Majorana particles,
Yeah.
saying these articles only written in 2014 and there wasn't even proof of their existence until 2012.
Yeah.
And yet an entire industry has been built up around theory.
So very new basic science. Cool. Okay. Yes. Okay. I think that makes sense what Heng Long is writing. And I actually have a note about that. And I think this may be one of the reasons why. So it's interesting, by the way, that In-Q-Tel, which is that investor in these technologies, is actually also a customer, right? So I think what's actually really interesting about the goal that Heng Long is writing about is that it's not just that they're trying to attract customers rather than only relying on investors. They're often attracting investors who are customers, like In-Q-Tel, Google, Boeing. So
Amazon, Lockheed, all of
yeah,
them.
exactly.
I think. And I keep using the word intractable, because I mean it. I mean, organizations don't invest in R&D at this level unless there's a really serious problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah, in fact, what we're talking about is investors who are also customers.
Yeah.
And what is the okay? And I think what I'm trying to get to is what I think Belinda is getting to. What is the reason for doing this, right? So proof of concept obviously needed because there's lots of skepticism about why this exists. Establishing the correct approach to developing practicable quantum physics. That's also important because that will cause research effort to converge behind one approach and speed things up. What is the reason why they want to attract customers rather than only rely on investors? And I think this goes to what Belinda, you were saying just before I kind of interrupted. Like,
well, happy to. I think the question can be asked both ways. Why are you attracting customers who are also investors?
Yeah.
And why are these industries driving each other? People have got to the end of current computing power. That's it. They're unable to grow their businesses.
Yeah.
And you see that incredibly specifically. What's interesting is the comparison across the industries that they're talking about. Talking about very complex logistics, so the Amazons of the world, and then you're talking about very artificial intelligence, unquantifiable, amorphous worlds like Intel.
Yeah. Where is the evidence for this bit? I mean, again, it's sprinkled throughout. Let's just pull out a couple of pieces. So basically, I'm going to re-summarize and restate, I guess. It's that current computing power limitations mean that the customers with the most pressing needs are now incentivized to also invest in the R&D, right? So your incentive alignment is great at the moment. And examples of that include.
Okay, well, in A1, page 1, paragraph 3, and then page 3, paragraph 3 are both talking about optimization and the limitations that currently exist.
Cool.
Intractable. I can say it.
You can say it.
Yeah.
All facing currently intractable, large or thorny computational problems that must be solved for business to grow.
Yeah. Optimization is market share. That's it.
Optimization is market share. Okay, great. Did I get the page? Did I get the page citations right? A1, page 1, and page.
A1, page 1, 3. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great.
Assuming I got them right.
Let's hope. Okay, so we're at 18 minutes. I think we've kind of rolled out some of the goals. Let's move on, just because we're keeping track of time, to the external and also the internal situation. So, what are some of the constraints that this industry is facing, externally anyway? So I can leap in on this one. The first one, I think, which we've kind of already mentioned, is that the science is not well understood, for one, and also actually in dispute, right? So not only do people not really understand something, it's at the level of interpretive ambiguity that even results cannot be interpreted in ways that are universally agreed upon. So that's the first thing.
Yes. So page 4 in A1 talks about the burden of proof.
Yeah.
The burden of proof is on them. They haven't met that burden yet.
Yeah. And the burden of proof, just to be clear, that you have managed to create quantum effect.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then by inference that it meets the needs of
Yes.
those who are investing in it. Because it goes on in the following paragraph to say that we could just be developing very complex, similarly analog computers.
Yeah, exactly. Just like a very powerful version of a conventional computer today, rather than a very primitive version of a quantum computer. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the reference to F-35s in the article is particularly relevant.
Correct.
A plane I love dearly, the poor little thing.
Cool. Science is still, so I think, and I think also that academics are, well, yeah, we shouldn't just restate it because that's actually exactly the same thing. Cool.
And I think the most sort of concrete reference that we were talking about before about the investor customer, which feeds into this as well, is page 5. Yes, page 5, paragraph 1 or 2, again, on proof of burden.
Okay. So
whether or not this can ever satisfy other skeptics doesn't matter to the market.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What other constraints are we facing?
Apart from the knowledge of producing the thing itself, I think there's also a gap between producing it and how to like utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All we know, I mean, the most clear part is like using machine learning. That's what is mentioned frequently. But apart from that, what are the potentials to make the profit is still a question mark.
Okay. How do we phrase that constraint in the environment clearly?
Silence.
Well, do you want to give it a shot and try and write it out?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, part of what we're doing is write something down. If it doesn't look right, fix it. Keep doing that. I think that's a good way of thinking about how this process works, right?
I think one of the largest internal constraints is this, and somewhat ironically, given what they're trying to achieve in terms of particle interaction, but it's the completely separate way in which different streams of each business are working and having to pull information together.
Say more. What do you mean?
So they talk specifically about the ways in which engineers are working, and they're tasked with delivering certain elements of the project rather than, for example, to refer to
yes.
The Apple case study that we were looking at. Everybody's co-designing. It's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
This is being approached as on the basis of this source. as a design process involving specialists, all working in kind of a linear way towards a common goal, but without necessarily working together.
Okay, how do we, I think that's a very good point. How do we phrase that? So that's definitely an internal constraint. It's like there's basically, I'll just put something in there and we can fix it. There's lots of smart people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm finding the specific reference where they speak to two engineers who say, I don't know what we're doing. I'm just told to do my bit.
Yeah. But they're siloed instead of
that is one way of
working. I hate that term.
and I think that marries well. But annoyingly it fits here. And I think that marries well with the similar external constraint, which is that everybody wants slightly different things.
Yeah. So everyone here meaning companies,
investors / customers. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think so I think what we're all trying to point to with these two sets of constraints, both external and internal, is that somehow you need people to be working together and in an integrated way, rather than in slightly non-aligned ways separately, right? So that you can harness all of that effort and smartness, I guess,
yes,
in the right direction. I think what this highlights to me is another problem, which is there is actually, because the science is still not well understood, it's not actually possible to know what the correct way is to put everyone behind, right? So
yes, that's right. And they refer to that a lot, the analog approach to a quantum problem.
The analog, say more about that. The analog approach to the quantum problem?
Oh, yes. So, for example, in A2, on the second page, Michael Friedman quotes Fit and Tanned. Michael Friedman is talking about the fact that the more you work on this, the more you realize that we as humans are analog computers.
Yeah.
So trying to think in a way.
Yes.
It's not just counterintuitive, it's impossible.
Yeah. So is that an external and internal constraint?
It's both. I think it speaks to what we were talking about in terms of how the development process has been developed within organizations.
Yeah.
That people have been instructed with individual engineering tasks, in essence.
Yeah.
Almost in an effort to see what happens when they come together.
Yeah.
Much you do when you throw particles into a space.
Okay. How would we phrase that
And
as
then,
a constraint?
Yeah. That they're trying to work. So yeah, in the same way, there's lots of smart people working on the problem. They're siloed. There are lots of smart people working on a problem which we don't yet understand. Because
yes.
of streams of theory.
Okay, so that's an internal constraint, maybe, and an external constraint. But how do we phrase it? The constraint is that the means and the ends are both not clear yet. Let's table that thought for a bit and think about, okay, so I'm just going to make a note of it. Okay, so we'll come back to this. What about opportunities?
I'm talking a lot, Henlong, so.
Well, I think the most apparent one is the huge need for this technique, the need for optimization.
Say more about that. Unpack it a little bit for us.
Basically, it refers to optimization is the fundamental to the wealthy creation on internet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
How is it an opportunity?
That will, well, that's the source of money. That's why this whole industry can emerge. If nobody as the end customer pay for it, then nobody will do any research about it.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'm trying to get to the point where we can articulate why it's an opportunity for these companies. Like, okay, why don't you put it in text? Just like type it in there. Like I keep trying to tell people also, and this is something which is hard to do, right? Like thinking and writing at the same time is difficult, but it's useful because when you say something, it sounds like it makes sense. When you write it out and you look at it, maybe it doesn't make any sense anymore. It's really important to write things out so that you can see whether in the course of writing it out, you can make it better and make more sense. So
I think both of the articles speak quite clearly to the tension about the external opportunity with optimization as well, because of the way in which these companies are developing the technology and understanding the elements required within it.
mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily delivering on the wider need. And we spoke about it before, that sort of amorphous, unknown understanding about what government or Intel might want, as opposed to massive transformation in logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
So that it's both opportunity, but also it's the ultimate opportunity, proving this works and then helping everybody.
Okay. So basically what we're saying is it's an opportunity because everybody needs it. And if you manage to build a quantum computer, you have the best tool for providing optimization that would be available.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I also want to add a bit. It implies that the customers are not really price sensitive. I mean, they're like Amazon, Google, they don't care about how much they will pay if you really can produce the product.
Yes. So some customer investors are not price sensitive. So I think these three opportunities are actually, they're quite tightly connected to each other, right? The fact that people need optimization so that they can make money makes them not price sensitive when it comes to something that will help them get around the problem that the exponential growth in classical computing power is tapering off. So they're not price sensitive in relation to any new technology that can help them get over this impending limitation on the ability to do optimization.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Also,
go ahead.
A very related point is there's no better or not better, but there's no clear alternative to the quantum computer because is that the constraints of the growth of the conventional computer, I mean, they cannot be much faster than it is right now.
Yeah, that's that first opportunity, right? There's a clear indication that the exponential growth of classical computing power is tapering off. So
Yeah.
our ability to keep making our classical computers more and more powerful is becoming less and less over time.
Yeah. So as you said, the three opportunity kind of are linked together.
Totally. Where do we find evidence for this one? Can someone just fill that in for a bit? And then I'm going to try and add, because I think also, I want to just kind of pull all these things in. We should fill in this box, that box. Cool. So lots of cool. Let's see, where do we find evidence that customers, companies, and investors want different things? Yeah, investors.
So let me go back to O2.
So A1, P4.
And A2 as well, with Craig Mundy
Cool.
talking about Microsoft and their comparatively slow approach or slow take up of quantum.
What page?
Page 4 in A2.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Page 4.
So there's a good example of not really understanding what they're getting into.
Yes.
Being slow on the uptake. So it's not just that people want different things, some don't know what they want.
Yeah. What else?
Then in A1,
Cool. I think there's also something about In-Qtel. So I will take a look in here. You know, if someone is not actively working on one of these, we should try and fill in these two as well.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to add a couple of things to this thing. So maybe Belinda and Heng Long take one each of these.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, I'll look at this
Cool.
constraint here. I don't know where I wrote it down.
Ooh. Hmm.
I love the end of A2.
The end of
Just
A2.
a professional slam.
Yes.
With a payoff so big, who can blame them for taking a whack at it? Yeah.
Why not? Take a whack at it.
Best read in an Australian accent, I think.
Okay, so smart people working on. Where was that section, Belinda, that you were talking about, where there were all these researchers working kind of.
That's what I'm trying to find.
Yeah,
It's
I
here.
remember reading that too.
I think it's in the second one because that's more
Yeah.
cursive. But I can see why they stopped working on it. It's a pain in the ass.
Yes, indeed. Countless other.
I think speaking about the collaboration as well, that's the interesting part about Bell potentially with their limited resources. They talk about necessary collaboration.
Yes.
So that's the contrary to where they say they're working. So that's on page 8 in A2.
Yeah.
He used to work with just 3 other physicists, but he's begun collaborating with mathematicians and optics experts as well. It's expanding into a relatively big effort.
What page is that on? That's on page 8?
I've lost it already. No, 6, I think.
Okay.
Where did it go? Hang on. I'd moved on. Bell. Oh, it's page 8. First full paragraph.
Yeah.
And then the paragraph after being very interesting indeed, that he sees himself as an academic colleague of Microsoft rather than a corporate competitor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the contrary. That's where the collaboration starts, really.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to find that one where they're all working separately.
Great. Okay.
I love physics jokes.
And I guess the autonomy is station Q.
Mm-hmm. Ah, found it finally.
We.
So A1
Chuck it in
page
there.
4, the first paragraph. Yes, got it. I could do that.
Yeah. Okay. Where are P2, P9? P2. Okay, great. Okay. Do we want to rephrase this a little bit more clearly?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Let's narrow in on the detail.
Yeah.
Well, I think it follows on from the one before that people are being told to design.
Yeah. Is A1P4 the citation for this quote?
Yep, A1 page 4.
Great. I'm just going to move it to the back for clarity.
Yes.
And this, I assume, goes to the back of that. What a mysterious question. What is the real power? So I guess the internal, why is this an internal constraint? The means and the ends are not clear. I guess it's that
it's a constraint because when you're trying to direct scientific inquiry, it's nice to know why.
Yeah.
And if this was purely research, then that would be fine. But it's about market capitalization. It's about optimization in every sense.
Mm-hmm.
True. So I guess the what we're really saying here is that quantum can be powerful and could be disruptive, but you have to understand how to make that potential into reality.
That's almost a quote that I've put there. Let me get the exact quote. It's okay. Almost a quote.
Almost. I'll find it. In the meantime, I think because it is now 50 minutes in, which means we have 20 minutes to go, which is great. Let's think about moving to the next page. To P9. Oh yeah, I so quantum computing it's so close. Well, you got it? Great, perfect.
I'm on fire. Yeah, it was so close. I paraphrased by essentially plagiarizing.
And inverting the order. Okay, great. Let's move on now to this page. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Hong Wong, for doing that. So nice. Cool. So what do we say are the actions adopted to pursue the first goal, like to get proof of concept for both the technical aspect of how quantum computing works as well as use cases? So one clear thing that they're doing is they're finding investors who are also like users, right? Customers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I'm just going to make all this a little bit smaller.
Yep, so that's your...
Cool.
I had a quite high level answer for that.
Please, go for it.
It seems they all have especially Microsoft, it has a very comprehensive structure so that, it try to maximize the possibility of the pool of the concept. By the comprehensive structure, they are funding research on the materials, and also the key techniques required for the compete, and also have talented people in their in-house R&D teams. I'm also collaborating with researchers in the bio lab.
Yep.
I'm also a team like design to think how to exactly make profit from the potential product. So this is a very comprehensive structure in my eyes.
Okay. Write it into the best that you can, and then we'll clean it up.
Okay.
I'm going to try my best to go up and look. It's quite challenging. I want to make sure that we put the evidence in here as well. So Belinda, what is you know what I'm looking for in here, like the wide range of potential use cases is that kind of means and ends an unclear thing from the previous page. Like, do you? Yeah, maybe I can.
So the way, I mean, they break it down in a couple of ways. One talking about the potential customers and actual investors.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Use cases. You've got logistics, AI.
Well, I was just thinking about getting the evidence out from the previous page, right? So there we have evidence that there are a wide range of potential use cases. You know, the means and ends thing was unclear. And one reason why finding investors who are also customers is useful is because you don't have to focus on the use cases that your investors who are also your customers don't care about, right? So I think one reason I think finding investors who are also customers is a strategic action that takes advantage of this external and internal set of constraints and opportunities is because you're in this world where there are so many things quantum computing could possibly do. You can't do all of them. But if your investors are also your customers, then you don't have to do all of them. You just have to focus on the things that your investors who are also your customers might want to have as use cases. So, where?
So specifically, yeah.
So I just want to put a page reference in there and then move on. Is that so hard? But I can't do it because I'm still on this page. Let me see. I'll pull it up on my tablet PC, which is a conventional classical computer. All right, let's see. Cool. Yep. A2, P9.
P9, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 9's the big cluster there.
Yeah. Where is the bit where they talk about, oh yeah, A1, P5.
Oh, on the urgent need for, yeah.
Cool.
Don't forget the F-35.
Where's the F-35?
I'm trying to find it.
Oh God, okay.
Page 2A1.
Okay, great, perfect. That's all there. Cool. Okay, Hung Long's writing a little disquisition. Very cool.
Nice.
Cool, cool, cool. Excellent. I like it. Okay, so how does this strategic action take advantage of the firm's internal and external constraints and opportunities? So I think one thing it's trying to deal with is trying to narrow down approaches, right? So one of the constraints in the environment is the science is unclear. So obviously you should try and like clarify the science. Proper approach. So let's see. Science is unclear. Okay. I will keep on filling this out. Let's kind of keep going, right? Let's not stop. Let's crack on.
Approach to developing.
Okay.
Just finding the reference point that I'm looking for. Very cool.
Establish the correct approach. I think. So for the second goal, I think one action that they're definitely taking, which I think is really smart, is running things like conferences and academic symposia. Also hiring or funding academic physicists. And we can talk about why.
Yeah.
And to that point, I'm very interested in, they wrote a paper and published in Nature, which is, from my own perspective, a very convincing one. And also it helps to stimulate the academic conversation, which also definitely enhance the knowledge domain.
Totally. I think we should actually, that's actually part of the first goal as well, right? So not only what you've written there, having a comprehensive structure to stimulate the various directions in which you can prove this concept, but also publishing your reports, not keeping the thing as a trade secret, but in fact trying to publish it because it's like kind of like proof propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Cool. Okay, so where are the academic symposia and conferences?
Oh my God, Linda.
Where's the F35? That's A1P2. Great. Cool. Got it. Yep.
Got
Cool.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Other than in my heart.
Yes. P1, P2. Cool. Fighter planes are clearly very close to your core interests.
They are. I finally saw an F-35 fly in Australia after many years of trying to get them off the ground.
That's good.
Very exciting.
Where is the bit where they talk about publishing in peer-reviewed journals like Nature?
That's article 1,
Yeah.
page 4.
Cool.
And also page 2 if you like.
Cool. Okay, great. Let's fill in this column then. And again, I just want to be really clear about trying to articulate why the action makes sense given the constraints and opportunities that the company faces, right? So we talked about the first one. Let's talk a little bit about the second one. Why is it so important to have a comprehensive structure to stimulate the possibilities of, let's find a better way to phrase it. So they're not just, I think what Heng Long is trying to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that these companies in the industry are not just choosing to do one thing, they're doing a whole bunch of different things. And there's a reason for that, right? So what is the reason? Like presumably you would only be able to know how to do just one thing if the science was clear, if the proper approach was clear.
Yeah.
There's lots of possibilities for what the science could be, lots of possibilities for what the proper approach could be, then you need to try lots and lots of different approaches. So I think that's one way. But that's just talking about it from a constraints perspective. Would it be?
I think it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think it takes advantage of the investor and customer approach. They're willing to commit large percentages of R&D budgets to this because of the potential payoff.
Yeah, and so I think what Belinda is saying maybe is that you couldn't do so many different things if you didn't have lots and lots of money to do it, right? And so not only is it necessary to do it because the science is unclear, the proper approach is unclear, but you also have the resources to do it because the customers and your investors who are the same entity, they're willing to commit huge amounts of money because the potential payout is so big.
Yeah, so huge amounts of money and a great deal of risk appetite.
Yeah.
Because,
And related to the constraint perspective, because I studied this topic before, it also reminded me the wisdom of crowds because you ask a branch of people to do it. So the likelihood that any single one of them can make some breakthrough is higher.
Yep. Phrase it in there. Where is the payoff is so big evidence?
there are a few quotes.
There are a few quotes. Yeah, there we go. I've got them. A1P5 and A2P9.
Yeah. A1P3, E1 optimization.
Yes. A1P3 and?
A1P1.
Great. All the odd numbers.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
It's very pleasing. I mean, after all, people have moved from highly skeptical to cautiously optimistic.
Yes. Okay. So publishing reports of experiments in peer-reviewed journals that have high reputational value. I think this takes advantage. This is a smart way of dealing with one environmental constraint, which is there's lots of skepticism in the scientific community, right? So high reputation publications help reduce skepticism. I think publishing like this also helps get the community to converge around particular ways of doing things or particular ideas. So the other thing about which we've talked about before, if the science is unclear, the proper approach is unclear, it means that there's lots of possibilities about what the correct way is of doing things. Now, if you publish an experiment that is successful in a peer-reviewed journal that has really high reputation, then you sort of convince the community that that thing that you've published is the right thing to do.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and with specific reference in the articles to lack of peer review.
Yeah. Where's that?
That is A1, page 4.
Yeah.
So far, the company has presented proof of neither or neither, depending on your preference, in a peer-reviewed forum.
Yes. A1P4. Cool. Yes.
Help reduce skepticism and encourage cautious optimism.
That's what page is that?
The cautious optimism is the very end of A1.
Okay, so that's page 5, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's the last line.
Page 5. A2. P1. Great. Okay. I would say that running things like conferences and academic symposia, it also, by bringing the scientific community into contact with the kind of the industrial community, it also has the same effect of publishing reports of experiments in peer-reviewed journals, right? So I would just copy this down to here.
And also builds that community that we were talking about.
Yeah.
In terms of it lacking previously.
Yeah. So in this case, it would be, so Belinda, can you put that at the end? I'm just going to rephrase this first sentence. Put that down in this bit. So.
Just remember where that was. No, that's it. Yeah.
Did I hear a cat? I like it.
Yes.
Good. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to do anyway.
very vocal.
He's very upset because the door is closed.
I recall.
Yeah.
You know, so much of what these companies seem to be doing is trying to manage the skepticism in the academic community, because it seems that the more skepticism there is, the less credibility these companies have as being able to interpret the results of their experiments as being successful results, right? So one thing which I noticed when reading these cases was that whenever a company, for instance, D-Wave, does something with a machine that is supposed to be quantum computing, most of the skepticism about whether or not it is quantum computing doesn't come from inside the industry, even though there is some of that. Most of it comes from the professional academic community. So I suspect that's true of the other companies as well, although we don't see as much direct evidence. And so it seems like so much of what we say they're doing in terms of actions is about reputation management and mitigating the skepticism that's going on in the non-industrial academic quantum physics community.
I think that's true, and immediately jumping to the assessment as to whether or not it meets quantum requirements, rather than embracing, as the customer investigators, the iterative developments that happen along the way.
Yeah. Where do we, let's phrase that and put it in.
Okay, so it was mentioned a little bit before, or I put something down. Okay, so I talked about it in terms of maintaining the customer and investor relations, almost by incidentally or incidentally, as I've written, solving problems, chip size, addressing the F-35, my little obsession, etc. But that sits contrary to the way in which scientific and peer-reviewed analysis happens.
Yeah.
You didn't meet your stated goal. What is quantum computing?
What is quantum computing? Yeah. Where do we?
I mean, not relevant to these sources, but it's very interesting looking at where all of these companies sit now and how they've adjusted their approach.
Yes, that's true. Okay. Let me just delete those who all fit on the same page. Solve current problems. Great. Right. Let's change that.
I'm redefining English, the English language.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing we've mentioned throughout, but I don't think we've specifically stated, is the shift by these investor customers to drawing everything deliberately in-house. We talk about having talented physicists on the team in in-house R&D, but there was a lot of watching and waiting at the beginning.
Yes.
I think that's the ultimate.
So where is that?
So in A2, I didn't mean to dramatically
Where
say
do we put it?
Yeah, where do we put it? Talking about Microsoft's in-house team and it attracting physicists, partly because they've got extraordinary amounts of money. Imagine the playground.
Yes. I guess it actually fits into both goals 1 and 2, right? Like, yeah, I guess if you took a step back and you thought about what the most important resource was for doing what all these companies are doing, it's making sure that you have access to the right people. And they do that by hiring the right people as well as by funding people in academia. So how would you phrase that action?
Yeah, I think there's also something about meeting proprietary need, because as we've discussed, this process is really messy and therefore it's not very quick.
Yeah.
So I have things that I want to do.
Where is this? This is A2 somewhere. They were talking about Microsoft, I believe.
Yeah, page 5 talks about the Microsoft team and bringing physicists on board.
Yeah.
References their 11 billion R&D budget.
11 billion R&D budget. $11 billion. Okay. So how does this action take advantage of the firm's external and internal constraints and opportunities? Clearly, this is only possible because you've got lots of money.
Yeah. And it removes some of the constraints, which is dependence on an external resource to deliver against your own problems.
Yeah. Actually, I think there is one external constraint which we didn't write about. I'm just going to put it in here, which is there's actually a very small number of people worldwide that understand this physics, right? So that is
Yeah. I didn't want to go into that in case there were any questions.
Where do we find this? I remember reading it somewhere. Someone find it for me, if you would.
Yes. No one knows what this means.
Yes, exactly right. I think the number was like count on the fingers of one hand or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And not just understanding, it's a wider thing about physics, theoretical to genuine particle.
Yes. So where is that?
#physics. Well, I mean, that's throughout.
Yes, but there was a specific bit where they talked about how many people worldwide you could, right?
Yeah. I'm
okay, well we'll find it. I'll put it in there. All right.
Yeah.
Solve current problems F35 with a view to market. Okay, I think this goes back to the same issue of narrowing down a wide range of use cases. That's definitely that. Cool.
I remember that reference
Oh,
to
that's
people not understanding it. I just can't find it.
Hong Long, do you know where it is?
You mean the physics one?
Yeah, the somewhere someone talks about how few people there are internationally who know enough about this to be able to be useful in developing a quantum computer, right?
Yeah. Supposed to be in Article 2, and then
Probably.
is that as the same as no one can control physics?
No one can control which?
Physics.
I don't think so. No,
there is a different bit about genuine understanding in addition to the control element, which is on page 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how many people can understand this stuff, right?
Yeah. Where is it?
Where is it? Should have made better notes, all of us.
I made a great deal of notes.
Yeah.
I just didn't put some very useful things down. Proof of concept.
Okay. Well, I'll find it and I'll put it in there. Well, I'll find it. I'll put it in there. I don't want this to just like drag out indefinitely.
No, absolutely, but yeah. It's there.
It is in there somewhere, and we will find it. Let's just kind of wrap up because now we're at almost an hour and a half. what were your thoughts about the experience of going through this? You know, it's kind of a weird, slightly twisted thing to think about an industry that is forming as an organization. But in a sense, when you look at it, when you look at these two cases from this perspective, you see that there actually is a sense in which the industry is doing something that's very coherent. Like they're all, in a sense, doing the same thing, even though they look like they're doing different things, building different kinds of computers. But they're all trying to do the same thing to deal with the problems that they're facing in the environment while using the resources that they all seem to have, right? What were your thoughts about it, both of you? If any.
Yep, I'm happy to jump in. I completely agree. I think it's a really interesting way of assessing ecosystem of design and how organizations are customers and investors at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Co-collaboration, co-iteration.
Cool.
And also interesting is, like as you mentioned, the competitors, if they go out as the mature companies, they should be the competitors. But now definitely they can benefit from each other by the knowledge they produce. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Great. Well, after we get off this video thing, I'll clean up this a little bit. And next week, we will talk about yet another different looking kind of case. This time, not about a company or an industry, but about strategy for one single person. All right, so we'll have that to look forward to for next week. All right, very good. With that, we'll just wrap up on this.